Hi, my name is Isabel. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be sewing this dress.
So today's dress is a modified version of another dress of mine, which is the Athens long dress. There are a few modifications that I made.
What is different? I'm cutting a bit of the arm because I wanted to show more shoulders, and I'll have to modify the facing. I'm going to show you everything in the tutorial in a bit. So the idea was I'm going to put some buttons on the sides with slits on the sides as well, and that way it's gonna spare me the step of having to put an invisible zipper in the back, right? Turns out it's really annoying having to open all these buttons. There are like 40 something on each side, and I have felt a bit claustrophobic taking so much time, so I really recommend that you also add an invisible zipper. Let's look at what you will need to make this dress. First, the fabric. You want to take a fabric with a nice drape, flowy and a bit heavy. So a slightly heavy crepe would be nice, and linen is great too. This is what I took. You'll need some interfacing, thin and woven, non-stretchy, and a lot of buttons. I bought cover-up buttons on Amazon. They're really good. I recommend them. All right. Here are the pattern parts. There are 2 parts in the back and 2 parts in the front too. I'm zooming in on the armholes to show you closer what I'm about to do. I don't want to sew the dress exactly as is. I want the armhole to be a bit more open and the back a bit more racer back too, so that this long dress, which is sort of classy, gets a bit of a sporty hint. You can see here that I have traced some lines with my pencil already, here on the front and here on the back, and I've made 2 lines. One is the cutting line and the other one is the seam line. First thing I did to trace these lines is to take my Japanese ruler and bring the shoulders to being 4 centimeter broad, so 6 centimeters with the seam allowances, and I made sure the front and the back are both as wide so the parts match in the right way later on. And then I took the curved ruler to draw the curves. I didn't follow any particular rules, I just did what looked good to me. And remember that the outer line you'll trace will be the cutting line and not the sewing one. Okay, now that I've changed the armholes, I'll have to adjust the facing. I trace the outlines of my armholes. The front here, I'll make the facing 5 centimeter wide, so I trace with my Japanese ruler again. And as I am approaching the shoulder seams, I'll narrow it so it doesn't overlap the neck hole facing. I do the same for the back armhole. And I'll cut the neck hole facings as well, which I haven't traced anew, but I did trace new lines to narrow them towards the shoulder seams. Alright, I've cut my facings, I have backed them with interfacing, and I have finished the outer edges. Let's move on to sewing the front. Here are the front pieces in my fabric. I'm going to pin them and sew them right sides together. I respect 1 centimeter of seam allowance. There you go. I do the same for the back. And let me show you what it looks like on the wrong side of the fabric. Now I'm going to sew the front and the back together at shoulder seam. And this is the result. Moving on to finishing the edges with my overlocker. So I did the side edges as well, but it's not necessary to overlock them yet, as if you do it now, like me, you'll have to do it again later, which is not a big issue. This is what I have now. I'm going to press the seams down. Let's move on to the fitting, which is the most interesting part of this tutorial. So even without having tried the dress, I know that it needs some adjustments because this is a 36 in a fitted style, and I am a 34 at the bust, 36 at the waist, and a 38 at the hips, which means that the waist should be fine, the boobs will be a bit baggy, and the ass will be tight. And for the ass, by the way, I'm planning to tap into the seam allowance to make it fit. I'm gonna baste the dress on one side just for the fitting, and even if it's just a temporary seam, I'll press the seam allowances open so there is no unwanted volume that will interfere with my fitting. So I've put the dress on, and you're gonna see that there are a few things to change just because my body doesn't have the exact same measurement as a regular 36. So first thing I have to change is hip width, because I'm a 38 here at hip level. So I am going to open the seams here and here, but I'm not going to be removing the overlocker stitch. Then we've got the bust, which is too big. I want it to be a bit more cinched because in the back, see, it's a bit loose. I want it just a little bit more cinched. So I'm going to remove 1 centimeter here and here of seam allowance till the waist. So I have removed another centimeter of seam allowance, which stops at waist level, and then I have just removed the seam also at waist level till the end, till the bottom of the dress on each seam here, 2 of the front and 2 of the back at the waist. So I'm gonna iron these seams open and try again. Okay, here is a bit of a change. So I have removed another centimeter from here to here, as you can see. Yeah. And on the side here, I have pinned 2 centimeters away instead of 1 until here, and I follow the curve. Opening the seams, as you can see, has given me a bit more room, so now I'm able to close the dress. To be honest, I find this still too tight at the ass, but this is my sample. I just have the 36 right now before grading the pattern, so gotta make do with it. What I would have done before cutting my size on the paper, I just would have traced curves to join the 36 at the waist to the 38 at the hips. Okay, so now there is something else that I need to change. It's this part here. So this part here, there are 2 options. Either I can pinch. If I pinch, I should pinch so that I don't change the neck hole, because my facing is based on this and I don't want to have to redo my facing again. Or the other option would be to pinch here and lift things up, you know, so they look like this, which I think could be a good option. So I still have to change the facing a bit here and, you know, the curve, but it wouldn't be too bad. Okay, so I'm wearing the dress inside out. Actually, I didn't pin until the bottom because I'm gonna leave openings on both sides. Now I want to take care of this part. Okay, so that's basically it for one side. I'm gonna just do the other side and show you. I have pinned, can you see? And I still find it a bit baggy here, so I'm gonna take some of the shoulders off, and that should be it. See, I've removed some distance. Now what you gotta do is take a marker. I don't know if that's the best, but you know, it's a sample. You can take a vanishing ink pen, maybe that's better, or something that's actually meant for textile, so you're sure that it's gonna vanish when you clean it. You come and you mark the line with the pen. Actually, you don't have to do it while you're wearing it, because I can just open the side and trace it. So I'm gonna do that. But I'm gonna do the sides though, before I remove the pins on the side. I almost forgot to show you, this is the front. You've got the armhole here. And I have traced the line, and now I'm basting over the line to make a final try. and if it works, I'm gonna use a final seam, normal length. Okay, so now that I have made my little tweaks, this is what we have. I have kept my pants underneath, so, but yeah, I think this is nice. In red, my basting seam, which I will now remove, and also with my regular stitch length. For the sides, we are too wide at the bust and waist, and for the waist, although I said I was at 36, I actually wanted it to be tighter. So make sure that both left and right sides are symmetrical, and then I'm gonna trace the cutting line 1 centimeter away from the seam line I traced with my pencil, and I won't cut the fabric yet because I'll wait to have the facing attached to it. Let's move on to adjusting the facing. So since I've made some changes to my armholes and my shoulder seams, I now have to adjust my facings. I'm going to pin my front neck hole facing, and I'll trace the new shoulder seam line. I do the same for the back. Then I sew the front and the back, right sides together. I press the seam allowances down and I pin the facing to the armhole. I sew, and here's how it looks. I'm gonna make some notches all around. And now I'll sew the facing to the seam allowance close to the edge. Et voila! Now we can press down and you can attach the facing to the dress by hand, sewing an invisible stitch. Now we have the side facing. The adjustment to make at the shoulder is minimal, so I'm not going to make any changes on my facing. I'm just going to sew them together at shoulders. I press the seam allowances open, I sew the facing to the armholes, and I top stitch the facing to the seam allowance. Now I'm going to cut the extra fabric on the sides, including the facing. And by the way, I'm not going to sew the facings to the side of the dress yet. They remain open for now. I'll make the sides now. So this takes a while because there's so many little parts to prepare. First, I'll make my buttons. I took some cover-up buttons, 13mm wide, which I prepared off camera. Then I cut off some fabric strips to make the button loops. They are 3.5cm wide strips, which I cut in the bias. You sew them right sides together, you cut off the seam allowances and turn them inside out with a loop turner. Then you cut your strips in small pieces, 5.5cm long. It's only if you have the same button size as mine though. So for now, I have sewed the strips on one side only. I've sewed them on the front, but I think it doesn't matter. You can do it on the front or on the back. And for the distance between the strips, well, every time I pinned the strips, I took my ruler and I measured 1 centimeter from the last strip. I inserted a pin to the 1 centimeter mark and I positioned my next strip in the middle. So the pin is in between the two legs of the strip. And for the other side, I pinned the parts and I sew 1 centimeter from the edge. I'm showing you a little mistake I made here because I sewed the facing underneath. You don't want your facing involved yet. The strips are sewed to the side of the dress, just one layer of fabric. This is done and I've also ironed so that this is what we see on the right side. So once the strips are all sewed, you can sew the facing to the dress on the side, fabric right sides together, so that when you turn inside out, it looks like this. Sorry, I forgot to film. Now I overlocker the sides to include the strips. I fold my sides, respecting my seam allowance, and I top stitch. So basically you're hemming the sides, and you hem all 4 of them. And now also my buttons. So you want to make sure that they are at the right distance from the edge. So I pinned the sides of my fabric edges against one another, the front and the back parts. I inserted the pen through each loop and I made a dot, and then I sewed my buttons on the dots. On the inside it's not so clean, and I actually don't recommend sewing buttons without interfacing. Alright, my last step is the hems. I tried the dress on and I decided to take 5 centimeters off. I'll probably sew this little gaping part by hand in a bit, and let me show you the inside where the facings are. Yup, that's it. Alright.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to be in the know of what I do, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. And I'll see you soon for more content. Meanwhile, you take care